Hello and welcome to the Gag Global Challenge. And if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, it's really kind of strange developments in the past few weeks, and particularly in the past few days, namely a drastic deterioration in relations between Russia and Azerbaijan, which on the face of it may seem surprising because um, Azerbaijan won its war against Armenia in 2020, and Russia really didn't do very much to stop Azerbaijan. And then in 2024, Azerbaijan essentially ethnically cleansed Nagorno-Karabakh of its Armenian population, and Russia really didn't do very much to stop Azerbaijan. And so one would have thought that relations between Russia and Azerbaijan would be quite cordial. But in fact, that hasn't happened. So the problems began in last year, on Christmas Day last year, when an Azerbaijan um, civil airliner was shot down by Russia. The exact circumstances are a little unclear as to what happened. It seems like a drone was tracking the airliner. The Russians targeted the drone. Whether they hit the drone and some shrapnel hit the airliner, or whether they hit the airliner, but either way, they clearly the airliner suffered severe damage. It couldn't land in Grozny in Chechnya, where it was supposed to. It had to land in Kazakhstan. It couldn't land in Kazakhstan, so it crashed during the landing, and a number of people were killed. And Azerbaijan was very, very upset about this, very indignant, and just wouldn't let the issue drop. Just went on and on and on about the issue, even though Russia
Well, it was a tragic
apologized.
accident. It obviously wasn't intentional.
Exactly. And Azerbaijan has not claimed that this was intentional. They didn't say, because what would have been, it's too stupid. I mean, what would have been the point of Russia shooting down a civilian airliner? But that nonetheless, it went on and on for several months. And then recently, um, the Russian authorities have been cracking down on various ethnic criminal gangs, because there's a lot of these criminal gangs, Tajik criminal gangs, Chechen criminal gangs, and of course Azeri criminal gangs. And so during this crackdown on these Azeri criminal gangs, so there were a number of arrests, but a couple of people died during the arrests. The exact circumstances
And
are
they were
unclear.
two elderly men in very poor health.
Two
Okay.
elderly men in poor health. Moreover, they were Russian citizens. I mean, they were of Azeri ethnic origin, but they were Russians. But either way, Azerbaijan went into absolute indignation, outrage, spluttering, and fuming, and so on. Even though this was obviously I mean, whatever may have happened during the arrests, this was not a politically, there's nothing politically motivated about it. This is obviously an attempt to crack down on organized crime. Um, but what Azerbaijan then did, it was kind of, when it was somewhat beyond the pale, because they then started arresting Russians who were in Azerbaijan. Now, those Russians hadn't done anything.
Media people.
Media people, exactly. The Sputnik in Azerbaijan, the Sputnik station in Azerbaijan, two senior figures there have been arrested and detained. Not just arrested, they're now
Well,
in.
and from photographic evidence, beaten.
Exactly, and that has actually been highlighted in some of the media stories, that in fact that they were clearly showing signs that they'd been beaten. And here, I mean, this is the BBC story. This is two deaths in Russia on custody, so on. It sparks this serious rift. And then it says this latest spat began last Friday when Russian police operations in the city of Yekaterinburg targeted suspects as part of a cold case murder inquiries dating back to 2001, which is not quite the case. They're just basically investigating Azeri organized crime, one thing that there is happened is this person there was a murder that took place in 2001. It remains unsolved, and it's part of the organized criminal activity that they were engaged
Just
in.
as an aside, everyone, when I first moved here, there was a mayor named Lushkov, and Lushkov widely believed to be very, very corrupt, using his wife as a surrogate. And it is alleged, I want to be very careful with my language, it was alleged that he was kind of the mediator of all of the ethnic mafias
Right,
in Moscow.
right,
Because he used to go to the Caucasus once in a while. People would say, "Why is the mayor of Moscow going down there?" And like he was trying to say,
right,
you guys get the port, and those
right,
guys get the warehouses. And it was this. And then, as he left in basically in disgrace, the new authorities came in and said, "We don't want any of these people here."
right.
And they pushed them, almost all of them, out of Moscow because Moscow is the financial and commercial center of Russia.
Okay.
So their profile went down dramatically. I'm not saying it's completely gone, but it's something that was focused in on because it was a big problem. Because you would have a problem with like Georgia, not because of geopolitics, it's because somebody's making a move on this sector in Moscow, and
Right,
then the Russians have to deal with it on a state to state level, which
right.
was like they didn't want to do. And so getting, tampering down and getting rid of these things, because it ended up being exactly what is happening now, an international relations geopolitical
Right,
headache.
right. Exactly, exactly. So here it says the two of the suspects, the Safarov brothers, died in custody. Several others were taken to a hospital. And then, but you see, here, this is the part that I find somewhat troubling. It says Azerbaijan's prosecutor general has now launched a criminal case accusing Russian police of torturing and deliberately killing the brothers. And then it says a post-mortem conducted in Azerbaijan found they died from post-traumatic shock after being severely beaten in custody. Now, the reason I find this troubling is I don't know why the Russians gave the bodies to Azerbaijan, because of course once they delivered the bodies to Azerbaijan, they're going to do exactly what the Germans did with the case of Navalny. Yeah, yeah, he was poisoned. Yep, we got evidence he was poisoned. So here, as soon as you hand these bodies back, they're going to say, yeah, we've definitely post-traumatic shock. They were severely beaten and tortured, and they were actually beaten and tortured. I mean, it's always going to happen. And when you do that, is that it's just grist in the mill. They're going to use that to accuse you. Um, and then says Russian law enforcement says one of the men died of a heart attack, and the cause of the second has not been confirmed. And then it says in response, Baku cancelled an upcoming visit by the Russian deputy prime minister. And then Azerbaijani media outlets with ties to government have criticized Putin, saying his rule is even more brutal than that of Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin.
Which is a
Um,
bit rich, everybody.
it
Okay.
is a little bit. It's kind of a funny because the media are having a difficulty because normally they would take an anti-Russian stance. It's all the Russians' fault, but they have difficulties with Aliyev. He's not exactly a kind of the sort of a liberal media darling. So they're kind of hedging their bets as to whose side they really want to take. But I mean, the Aliyevs have been running Azerbaijan, father and son, since I don't know when, the 1970s,
Yeah, I
maybe.
mean it's a family enterprise,
Right.
Soviet and non-Soviet.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Exactly. Um, and then and then they say Sputnik, and then here they say this triggered a propaganda war with Baku accusing Russian cultural organizations of espionage and demanding the closure of the Baku office of Russian state media outlet Sputnik. Sputnik remained operational until this week when Azerbaijani police raided its Baku bureau, detained two employees, and authorities allege both are affiliated with the Russian security service, the FSB. Um, and then Russia denies this, obviously. And then here's the Euro News. And it says Azerbaijan jails Sputnik executives amid escalating tension with Russia. And then the executive director and editor in chief of Russia's state run news agency Sputnik in Azerbaijan have been issued 4 months of detention on Tuesday. This is a little bit much. I mean, 4 months detention um, without really very clear what crime have they committed. So because what happened in Russia was part of an investigation into organized crime.
Well, and I don't think anybody in Russia and in Azerbaijan are saying that the two guys that died in Russia weren't criminals
That's right.
or alleged to be
Right.
criminals.
But why are they in 4 months of detention? Why are they in detention? Um, and then it says, according to Azerbaijan's authorities, they are being held on counts of fraud, illegal entrepreneurship, and legalization of property obtained by criminal means. And then the
So
Azeri.
this is what is this? Is this just a coincidence, or is this a reaction? Because
Well,
it sounds like
obviously,
it's a reaction. I mean, but also suddenly a Russian news outlet has been involved in illegal entrepreneurship. I mean, the cause and effect here
but
is
it
not a
sounds like from
coincidence.
from from the media stories, it says after the shoot down of that airliner, they took away the accreditation of Sputnik, which was in February. Then all this time they've done nothing. So apparently they continue to work at Sputnik, and now suddenly, oh my God, this is
Yeah.
horrific, and they arrested them and detained them. But so in both cases, it seems like a strange cause and effect. So the airliner goes down, and suddenly you deny them accreditation, and now you put them in prison. Um, anyway, then it goes on. The tension between Azerbaijan and Russia escalated over the past few days following the detention of 50 Azerbaijanis in Yekaterinburg in raids by the Russian Federal Security Services and so on. And then uh, uh, Azerbaijan-based broadcaster Anu Z said the news of deadly raids sparked outrage and calls for justice amid what the Azerbaijanis alleged as abuse and ethnic profiling. Now, what the hell's that about? What's the evidence that any of this is about ethnic profiling, particularly as it's an entirely internal Russian matter, and they are Russians. So it's not like Russia kind of crossed the border into Azerbaijan, kidnapped some Azerbaijanis and took them back and put them in prison. This is an entirely internal Russian matter, and they're getting very indignant about this, as if it has anything to do with them.
Hmm. Who
Uh,
does all this benefit?
Cui bono? I think it benefits NATO and Turkey.
Exactly, George. We haven't talked about this in
We are going
advance.
to talk about this.
We're talking about this cold turkey right now.
Right?
That's why I asked George that question because that's my answer. George's
Yeah,
answer is my answer.
exactly, exactly. Because why pick this fight? What's this about? You're just picking a fight about nothing. And so when somebody's picking a fight about nothing, you kind of wonder, well, why are you doing this? What's the agenda here? Um, and then some detainees have alleged that confessions were obtained through false threats and coercion, including pressure on family members. And then forensic experts have revealed that the Azerbaijani citizens killed during the Russian raids in Yekaterinburg, and they're not Azerbaijani citizens, this is just incorrect, died from blunt force trauma, not gunshot wounds, raising additional questions about the circumstance of their death. Azerbaijan's foreign ministry condemned the operation as brutal and unjustified and called on the Russian authorities to conduct an urgent investigation into the matter and bring the perpetrators of this unacceptable
Well,
violence.
it's a bit rich, everyone, and Azerbaijan is not a poster child for civil rights. Okay, it's if there's a criminal activity going on in the market, they arrest the entire market. Okay,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
they sort it out later. I
Right.
mean, it's very, very brutal and thuggish.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
it's just part of the culture.
Yes, very
Okay.
much so. Yeah. And then in addition, Azerbaijan summoned Russia's envoy to Baku to protest against the deadly raids and cancel the cultural events. And then this is what the Ministry of Culture said. This is the Azerbaijani Ministry of Culture says. In response to targeted and extrajudicial killings,
So this sounds like execution.
exactly. In other words, a deliberate killing, and acts of violence against Azerbaijanis based on their ethnicity, demonstratively perpetrated by Russian law enforcement agencies in the Yekaterinburg region of the Russian Federation, and considering the systematic nature of such incidents in recent times, all cultural events planned in Azerbaijan involving a Russian state and private entities have been cancelled.
What's very strange, George, is Azeris are very successful in the Russian economy and the business. And I'm not talking about criminals, okay?
Right.
Like I said earlier, they're the many of the ethnic communities have that element, okay? That's
Right.
not alien here. But there's a lot of Azeris that are very successful
Right.
and very happy to be Russian citizens, okay?
Right.
That's why it rings very weird for
Right.
me, okay?
Right. Right. What was the name of that guy? You remember that Azeri? You remember that entrepreneur? He was vaguely involved with Russiagate because he was friends, I think, with Don Jr. You remember that kind of that was what they set up that meeting at Trump Tower. You remember there was I can't remember his name. But he was a kind of a successful Azeri entrepreneur, billionaire in Russia, and somehow he knew Trump. I think he helped Trump organize that beauty pageant when Trump came to Russia in 2013.
That rings well, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Um, and anyway, in February, the Azerbaijani government shut down Russia's state-funded news agency Sputnik, but it has continued to operate, albeit with a reduced staff. But interesting, why did they shut down Russian state-funded news agency Sputnik? I mean, what's that about?
What does this have to do with anything? Yeah.
Exactly. And then it says the agency, although the agency's accreditation was officially revoked in February, the Azerbaijan Interior Minister stated that its data indicated Sputnik Azerbaijan allegedly continued its activities using illegal funding sources. And anyway, then it goes on. Russian authorities denounced the Sputnik office raid and as unfriendly acts, and then in additional developments on Tuesday, Azerbaijan's Interior Ministry announced that it dismantled 2 criminal gangs in Baku, detaining Russian nationals suspected of trafficking drugs from Iran and conducting cyber fraud operation. Now, this is such utter nonsense. I mean, the whole idea that you're going to be trafficking drugs from Iran into Azerbaijan. I mean, what kind of an idiot would do anything like that? I mean, you get involved in drug trafficking in Iran, it's instant execution.
And 2 countries that don't have good relations.
They don't have good relations. You do something like drug trafficking, it's an immediate death sentence. It's not a worthwhile activity. And then here this continues with same blah, blah, but yes, he said here it says this is the latest arrest on July the 1st targeted alleged members of 2 organized criminal groups suspected of narcotics transit from Iran, online trafficking of prohibited substances, and cybercrime. And then says, in courtroom photographs, several suspects appeared with visible bruises and swollen faces. One had a bloodied head wound. So remember, these are Russians. These Russians who are living in Azerbaijan, many of them had just basically had left Russia. They They didn't like the Russian government, didn't want to serve in the military or whatever, but they're living in Azerbaijan. These are Russians. They're not doing anything wrong. I mean, they're IT people, basically. They're living in Azerbaijan, and they have these visible bruises, swollen faces, and a bloody head wound. Um, and then, um, and then, meanwhile, Azerbaijan's foreign ministry delivered a note verbale of protest to Russia over the murder and injury of our compatriots in Yekaterinburg. And then Azerbaijan's protest note expressed firm protest against the use of torture and degrading treatment by Russian law enforcement agencies during the interrogation of our compatriots. Um, and um, and then it says that, and then it continues. Azerbaijan arrested two Russian journalists on June the 30th and ordered fresh autopsies on the two Azerbaijani brothers, escalating diplomatic tensions with Moscow as both sides traded accusations. But again, see, this is what I'm saying. The brothers arrived, the bodies, it's always a bad move to deliver bodies. I mean, you know exactly what they're going to do when they do the forensics.
Well, you could do the autopsy in Russia.
Exactly. You do the autopsy. There's absolutely no reason to deliver the bodies. You can just keep them there. We're conducting a full investigation. You can just drag this out. Delivering the bodies, you're just asking for trouble. It's just exactly going to be the same with the Navalny.
Well, what I would like to know, who is driving all of this?
Yeah.
Is it the Azari Foreign Ministry? Is it the Interior Ministry? Is this coming from the presidential palace? Because I'd be worried if I was Aleyev, I'd be a little worried. I mean, who's really putting this on steroids?
Right.
Because I mean, it's clear as day to me that there is an agenda here,
Yes.
and it has nothing to do with what happened to some punks
Yes.
in Russia.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think there's an agenda. I'd have to think Turkey has to be involved in this. Erdogan, who always has his finger in
Well, they had
this
such good
pie.
working relations over Armenia,
Exactly, and Israel. Israel is
Israel.
always involved in this because this is the Turkey-Israel Azerbaijan nexus. That's kind of an important thing. I mean, that's basically it's the road into Central Asia. And that's, of course, a long-standing project. It's
With a
going
lot of oil.
a lot of oil, but you remember that's a long-standing project going back to the 1990s. That sort of the Baku Ceyhan pipeline, basically how to bypass both Iran and Russia, and Armenia has now essentially been, rendered completely impotent. So they're going to press Pashinyan to build the Zangezur corridor. And essentially they're telling Russia, hey, butt out. You don't carry any weight here. And as in one of the stories features, the EU has already got in on this. They say, yeah, we're shocked. We're absolutely shocked by this treatment of this Azeris in Russia. This is absolutely appalling.
But not about Russians in Azerbaijan.
No, they're not. They're not shocked about that. um, and then I'm trying to find that there. And this is Zaharova says the detainees are Russian citizens of Azerbaijani origin. They were arrested as part of an investigation into serious crimes committed in previous years. The investigation is ongoing. And here's it says European Union ambassador to Azerbaijan, Peter Michalko, became the first senior Western diplomat to condemn the Yekaterinburg killings. Quote, I am deeply concerned by reports of violence, torture, and inhuman treatment by Russian security forces against ethnic Azerbaijanis, even resulting in deaths. My thoughts are with victims and their families. Now, this is so over the top and so ridiculous. Here, the EU intervening in what's an internal Russian affair. Russia is not a member of the EU. Azerbaijan is not a member of the EU, and it is, getting itself involved in this. And Zelensky also has got himself involved in this.
The EU has ambassadors. I didn't know that. Everything is duplicated, you know?
There's a lot of duplication, a real lot of duplication, because you also have NATO ambassadors. Um, um, and then says Russian authorities provided their first detailed justification for the FSB operation, claiming that Safarov brothers led an ethnic criminal organization active since the late 1990s. TASS quoted law enforcement sources alleging the groups engaged in illegal activities, selling drugs, alcoholic and tobacco products, gambling, supervising prostitution, and distributing pornographic materials. And it says the sources claimed one victim was an entrepreneur who refused to pay protection money and was murdered by the group. And they also suggested possible links to mass alcohol poisoning in Yekaterinburg in 2021 and ownership of kiosks selling counterfeit goods. So that's what they were investigating. And then here's the Times, also the tension. But I wanted to just show the where yes, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky called Aliyev. He telephoned him. He called Aliyev to express his condolences on the two deaths in Yekaterinburg. The Kremlin slammed the call as an attempt to unbalance relations between Russia and Azerbaijan and provoke tension.
Well, at least you can always count on Zelensky to be a spoiler. Yeah.
That's right. But one other interesting story is this one, which is the Iran, which has raised issues with Azerbaijan about its involvement with Israel. This particularly Azerbaijan's role in the recent war. It says Iran seeks probe into possible Israeli use of Azerbaijani airspace during the war.
Well, it's kind of interesting because Radio Free Europe is usually they're very defamatory,
Yes.
but they go, but here it's possible. Oh, it's so funny because
Yes.
even if it's they never use the word alleged, okay,
Right.
it
Right.
suits their purposes,
Right.
okay.
Right.
Everyone knows that Azerbaijan played a
That's right.
big part in the
That's right.
war against
Yes.
Iran. I mean,
Right.
it's common knowledge. Oh, but radio, oh, possible.
Right.
It could be possible. Yeah.
That's right. But this is again just shows you the role Azerbaijan is playing within this kind of dark Western planning. Azerbaijan is involved in Israel's war with Iran. Azerbaijan is involved in some kind of a geopolitical play against Russia in the Caucasus. The question then is, Azerbaijan may be playing a dangerous game here. You don't want to, you don't want to have an enemy to your north and an enemy to your south. I mean, both of whom are much stronger than you are.
Well, also, again, I'm not saying I'm not trying to be moralistic here or um, being a kind of a political supremacist or anything, but Azerbaijan is a family-run shop,
Right,
okay?
right,
And public opinion is not something they rely upon
right,
so much, okay? I
right,
mean, you're playing with fire,
right,
okay?
right,
Because you go there, it's a very beautiful place. It reminds me so much of California in many ways, very arid, some really swanky districts in Baku. I mean, the Maseratis and Lamborghinis,
right,
but that's for about 2% of the
right,
population.
right,
It's a very uneven, a very unfair
right,
place. Another country where if you're Azadi and you want to be successful, you go somewhere else,
right,
okay? And a
right.
lot of them are in Russia,
Yep.
okay? So, what I'm talking about is that, you may not have the most stable regime. On the outside, it looks very, very normal, but
Right.
it's very, very brittle, and that's a danger for them.
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Um, and so here we have the Iranian president has called for an investigation into whether Azerbaijan's airspace was used by Israeli
Of
drones
course it was.
as they flew missions to attack Iran during their recent conflict.
Well, all I want to know is were Israelis in
Well,
Azerbaijan? That's what
exactly.
I want
Well,
to know.
it's exactly. It's a little bit more than that. It's just that they used Azerbaijani airspace, that they were actually physically in Azerbaijan. And so it says Pezeshkian urged Azerbaijan President Ilham Aliyev during a call on June the 26th to investigate and verify reports that Israeli drones, including micro drones, may have entered Iranian airspace via Azerbaijani territory.
Well,
I love the politeness. Would you mind? Would you
yeah,
all mind, old boy, to investigate and verify it? I'm on it. I'm going to
yeah, well,
definitely
yeah, but I mean, this is
verify it.
what Iran's president is doing is calling the president of Azerbaijan is like, will you investigate and verify? But what he's saying between the lines, we've got the
Yeah,
receipts.
yeah,
We have the receipt. I just want to hear you say it.
that's right.
I want
Exactly.
you to tell me
All
that
right.
you weren't involved because we got the receipts.
Right.
Okay, we know you were.
Yeah. Of course. Of course. And then, according to the official Iranian readout of the conversation, Aliyev denied the claims and insisted that his government would not allow Azerbaijan's territory to be used against Iran. When you look at Aliyev's face, would you believe anything he said? I mean, that I mean, the guy just oozes
Well, I
insincerity.
mean, if you want an image of what kind of character he is, I mean, watching him hug Erdogan, that he's in good company.
Right, right. Yes, yes. Yeah. And it says on the same day, Israeli media cited an unnamed defense official as saying that Israeli defense forces had been operating in a country close to Iran during the war without offering further details. So that's the Israeli media. I mean, you don't even have to, you don't have to listen to what the Iranian government says. The Israeli media have been reporting this for some time. Yeah, they were using Azerbaijani territory to attack
Yeah, and
Iran.
it wasn't Sri Lanka, everyone. Okay.
Yes. Um, Azerbaijan's deepening ties with Israel have long been a source of unease in Tehran. The relationship has grown closer in recent years, marked by significant defense cooperation and the opening of an Azerbaijani embassy in Tel Aviv in 2023, moves that Iranian officials view with increasing suspicion. And according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, Israeli made weapons constituted approximately 69% of all major conventional arms shipment imported by Azerbaijan between 2016 and 2020. That's quite a whack.
Well, and everybody, what do you think the Azerbaijan, the arsenal was before 2016? It was all Soviet slash Russian. Now they've completely
Right,
replaced that, virtually almost all of it. And we all know that because of the conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh. Those were not
right.
Russian munitions; they were
No,
Israeli.
no, that's right. That's right. So that is the current state of play. So clearly, somebody's driving this. This is it's part of opening up a front against Russia. We know there's a front that's opened up for some time. It's been open in Moldova, and happily, there's going to be another election in Moldova in September, a parliamentary election this time, and already the EU bloodhounds are on the case because of the sniffing out Russian interference. So that's they can smell it.
Yeah, but you
The
see
Russian
this.
interference. So that's Moldova, and now there's another front, Azerbaijan.
Yeah, everyone, George and I have been saying this from the get-go. Yeah, NATO is going to get is getting a huge bloody nose over Ukraine. It's very embarrassing. They're going to have to lick their chops later. I'm sorry, lick their wounds. But meanwhile, oh, there's so much more plunder out
Right.
there. Okay, so it's good to continue. Even with, the rigging of the Romanian election, that was all about NATO,
Right.
everyone. It
Yep.
wasn't about anything else, okay? Moldova, George, and I have talked about exhaustively, and we've been saying from the get-go, more fronts will open up. Well, hello, everyone, okay? Yeah, so Azerbaijan's going to the mat over some punk criminals
Right.
in the middle of Russia?
Right.
Really?
Right.
Wow. They needed a pretext and they got it,
That's
okay?
right. That's
Now,
right.
what I'm interested in, as I said earlier, where is this coming from within the elites in Azerbaijan? Because Russia can hurt Azerbaijan, okay? It can hurt them economically with trade and all kinds of things like that. So, I mean, what kind of calculation is involved here? Is this like a warning shot? Making throwing kisses to the Americans and to the Israelis, saying we're a player here. What is the Iran angle to all of this? Because um, they have a lot to lose also. So this is a very risky endeavor.
It is very risky, but it is a long-term project. I mean, this really does go back
Agreed.
to the Brzezinski era. I mean, Brzezinski was already out of government, but he was still a very influential figure in the 90s. And I remember he was saying Azerbaijan is absolutely key. And he was when Aliyev's father was there, says, I remember Brzezinski says something, Aliyev is a cool cat. He says he's a cool cat, because he saw the enormous potential of Azerbaijan, using Azerbaijan and Turkey in order to push Russia out of Central Asia. And so this is a long-standing project. And so there's no question. There's a powerful figures who are behind this. The question then is, what does Russia do? Because you can't have countries just arresting Russians for nothing. I mean, you're arresting Russians, you're brutalizing Russians. In what I mean, there's you see this footage on YouTube. These are Russians who are being arrested and humiliated. They got their hands tied behind their backs. They're being pushed into a courtroom. Russians who have done nothing. I mean, this is just completely. It's
Well,
really like their only crime is that they're Russians. So then you have to ask, well, what does Russia do about it?
well, there's a lot of Azaris in Russia. They could be given their pink slip and they might have to go home.
Yeah.
Um, in 2008, there were a lot of illegal Georgians here, but a lot of the authorities just kind of, and all right, you're Georgian, okay, because they're very much part of the fabric of Russian society. They have been for a very, very long time. But Saakashvili wants to play rough. Well, then the favor was returned. That can happen. Also, unlike Ukraine, that borders NATO countries. Does Azerbaijan border Turkey?
Well,
No.
it can
It
if
it
Armenia,
can, yes, yes.
if
So
basically, I mean, once they can set up that Zangezur corridor, which is
yeah.
Chivan, which does border Turkey, and then through Armenia and into Azerbaijan, then essentially you've created.
How long is that gap? How wide is it?
It's not that wide.
Oh, it's not that wide. Okay. What I'm just trying to say is that Azerbaijan, you want to go toe to toe with Russia?
Right.
Throw the dice.
Yeah.
Because as George just said, it's all over Russian television right now.
Right.
And people are pissed. I mean,
Right.
what did we do to you?
Right.
And people are not happy about that, all right? And if Azerbaijan wants to make some kind of, proxy power play, well, you better be careful what you wish for, because Russia can make it very difficult for them. Slowly but surely, they can do the same thing, all right?
Right.
And Iran will saying, well, we've been telling you about these guys. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces here right now. And Erdogan, as a troublemaker as he is, because he's a troublemaker. He never, he never closes. He's not a closer. He
Right.
doesn't close. Okay. He initiates a lot of stuff and then he runs back. He's a
Right.
taco guy himself. Okay. And so, you want to press the issue. Be careful how much you want to go forward with this. Okay. Because public opinion here is that you don't have to get it riled up. It's riled up.
Right. Right. Now, it's possible that one way this could be resolved is if there's a prisoner swap. But then it also would be very unfair because, in a sense, you're now because those people who were arrested in Russia are suspected criminals, serious criminals. So if they're swapped for Russians who are completely innocent, then essentially that's a signal for every country to arrest Russians. Just hey, we can arrest Russians and we can get back our criminals. These people who have been engaged in criminal activities, probably maybe even spying activities. There's the speculation that some of them are also engaged in spying activities on behalf of whom I don't know whether it's Azerbaijan, Turkey, NATO, whatever, but they may also be spies. Um, but you can't do that. You can't just simply allow other countries to essentially practice extortion, seizing innocent Russians, and then okay, now we can get back our murderers and gang members and pimps and everyone else.
This is more serious than the coverage that's being given, everyone, okay? Because this is obviously the new front that George and I have been talking about, okay?
Right.
And it's one country after another. And George brings up an excellent point. You can kidnap people and, with impunity, and, Russia feels helpless about it. No, they don't feel helpless about it, okay? And we could go, we could have a people to people escalation. Okay. I don't think anyone wants to resort to force yet on this one here. But this type of behavior on the part of Azerbaijan is intolerable. I
Right.
mean, and a lot of people say you got to nip this one in the bud. All
Yep.
right. And it's not a coincidence, this whole thing with Iran and
Yep.
Israel, and it's all together, it's all part of the same
Right.
menu, everyone.
Right. Right.
It's not a
Yep.
coincidence.
Right. No, that definitely not. It's definitely not. That is as I say, it's a long project to use Azerbaijan against Russia and against Iran. This is the whole Baku-Ceyhan pipeline. It's to try to avoid both, and they're using Azerbaijan to be hostile to both. The problem, I think, as you point out, is Azerbaijan is still not a big country. It's a population of 11 million, quite rich with all the oil and gas.
Well,
But
some people are rich.
yeah, exactly. But it's 11 million. Iran is nine times the size of Azerbaijan. Russia obviously is much bigger. So if you don't play your cards right, you can have a war on two fronts
Well,
against
and,
much
and
bigger
plus,
powers than you are.
well, and Erdogan isn't going to come to the
Yeah,
rescue.
that's right.
He's not a guy with a white hat on a horse, everyone. He that is that's his pedigree. He's a troublemaker,
Right,
okay?
right.
And he's a clever troublemaker. But Israel is committing atrocities like we haven't seen since the Second World War, but they're still selling fuel to them. Okay, I mean this guy's full of shit. I'm sorry, okay,
Yep,
but he's good at troublemaking.
yep. Very, very, very good. Yes, yes. He looks frail, but he's a
He
he's
he
a,
is he is
he's a malevolent figure.
it's it's accelerating.
Yeah.
He is in decline. He's
He's not
definitely
really, he's not even that old, but he does look,
he
he
looks
looks
very
frail.
ill.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, with my eyes,
Right.
he looks very ill
Yeah.
and very fragile.
Yeah. And I
He's
noticed that
he's going into Biden territory.
yeah, I saw particularly when he's meeting Aliyev, because Aliyev just looks very hale and hearty, and he looked really frail, next to Aliyev. You think, wow, he's not looking good shape. And
And
he's
this is
just not that old. He just looks a lot older.
and this is part of his Erdogan's neo-Ottomanism, okay, because he's trying to corral the the nation, the what he thinks is part of the Ottoman world.
Right.
George and I have talked a great deal about how we have Han civilization, the Chinese, and you have Ruski Mir, and then you have the Persian civilization. Erdogan wants to tell us we're one of those.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
you're not, okay? You're just not, okay? You might be a proto or a beta version, but there's no real conversion. What the Russians, the Chinese, and the Persians, Iranians have is very, very real. And he's trying to tell us that he's part of the same category of civilizations. It's not the case, okay? It's a wish.
Yep. Yeah.
But we're
Yeah.
just as a public service here, George and I got to keep an eye on this one for sure. Okay, for sure. I'll probably this week. I'll do more of a deep dive and see if we can add some layers to this because there's a lot of intrigue going on, and the timing. Come on, this doesn't happen by coincidence. Okay, for me, having Azerbaijan go out, go to bat for these kinds of people that are involved in
Yeah.
nefarious
No, that
illegal.
exactly.
That for me,
That's
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 just
exactly that's the remarkable thing. This is mafia. These are Azeri mafia types who are under arrest, and to go and start using this extreme language. Basically, this is all driven by some ethnic hatred and whatnot, and this is typical Russian behavior and so on. Because this is obviously not directed at them because they're Azeris. This is all part of a criminal investigation. It'd be like saying, if you crack down on the mafia, you're directed at some hatred of Italians. I mean, it obviously isn't. But that's what the government, why the government is taking this line, and that's why it's so ridiculous, and why you have to think that there's a lot more that's going on beneath the surface.
yeah. Well, if Zelensky's popping
And
a
Zelensky's popping up, the EU suddenly
yeah,
popping
yeah, yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, that tells you everything, and it's sour grapes on their part because we might not be doing so well, but we can still hurt you, and that's what it's all about.
right, right.
That's what it's all about. NATO has lost the war in Ukraine. That's obvious, but we can still bleed the Russians, so it's okay. And that's the whole mindset. That's the whole mindset. Cause more trouble on your borders, besiege Russia being besieged. That's what they want. If they can't get regime change, then they're going to do this as long as they have the resources to do it. They have willing volunteers to do this. This is all part of the plan. This is why, this conflict, this conflict against Russia has been going on since Peter the Great. It never ends.
Okay.
Never ends. All
Yeah.
right, everybody. This will be your stop for what's going on in Azerbaijan. Okay, this is the Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Local, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. It's part of our Sunday wrap tomorrow. Live stream at 10 o'clock, God willing. George goes solo on Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Please join me. Join us tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and then think about the situation with the tip jar, because the point they're making is that I think some kind of a mafia has taken a grip on the tip jar and is refusing to share any of the lolly out. So they're getting very worried about this, and I can understand their problems. So in order to put their mind at rest, whatever you've got, any coins, silver, gold, crypto, cyber, anything, straight into the tip jar, no messing around. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology, and above all, we'll, alleviate some of the suspicions of these dogs about who's really controlling the tip jar. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.